The first hint that something was wrong came at 5:17 a.m. on June 2nd, 2021, when baggage handler Tommy Rodriguez noticed an empty cargo trolley where a locked container should have been sitting. The trolley sat abandoned on the tarmac at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, its restraining straps hanging loose in the humid Georgia morning air. According to the manifest, the missing container should have been loaded onto Copa Airlines Flight 201, bound for Bogota, Colombia, in less than 3 hours. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Leave a like if you're ready for a story that will change how you think about airline security, and comment below with your city so I know where my viewers are watching from around the world. Tommy had seen the container during the 4:10 a.m. cargo loading operation. A standard-looking shipping crate marked with aviation parts, labels, and secured transfer documentation. It was supposed to contain Boeing 777 display panels, according to the paperwork, routine replacement parts being shipped to maintenance facilities in South America. But by 5 a.m., when Tommy returned to complete the loading sequence, the container had vanished completely. Surveillance footage would later reveal the truth. During a carefully orchestrated 11-minute window, when security cameras mysteriously went offline, a lone figure had systematically stolen what federal investigators would discover was $16 million in cartel cash, disguised as legitimate aircraft equipment and destined for money laundering operations in Colombia. The thief was Marcus Dale, a 43-year-old airline mechanic who had worked at the airport for 17 years without raising a single red flag. By 6:30 a.m., airport security had located the missing container dumped near an employee exit, its heavy-duty locks cut open and its contents gone. What should have been high-tech avionics equipment was revealed to be vacuum-packed bundles of currency, hundreds, 50s, and 20s organized with the precision of a bank vault and packed to avoid detection by standard security screening. Marcus Dale never clocked out that morning. His maintenance tools were missing from their assigned locations. Most telling of all, his security access card had been manually deactivated from a terminal in Maintenance Bay 6 at exactly 4:43 a.m., 17 minutes after the estimated time of the theft. Someone with intimate knowledge of airport security systems had covered their tracks with professional precision. The man who had pulled off one of the most audacious airport thefts in recent history had vanished as completely as the money he had stolen, leaving behind only questions that federal investigators are still trying to answer 3 years later. Marcus Dale lived the kind of unremarkable life that made him invisible to almost everyone around him. At 43, he possessed the competent, weathered appearance of someone who had spent decades working with complex machinery in demanding conditions. His colleagues at Hartsfield-Jackson knew him as punctual, professional, and intensely private. Exactly the kind of employee that supervisors never worried about because he never created problems or required oversight. Marcus lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Decatur, Georgia, a suburb southeast of Atlanta that housed thousands of airport workers who preferred affordable rent over urban amenities. His apartment was spartanly furnished, reflecting both his practical nature and his recent divorce from Linda Dale, finalized just 8 months before the theft. The divorce had been amicable but expensive, consuming most of Marcus's savings and forcing him to downsize from the suburban home they had shared for 12 years. His background included 8 years as an Air Force aircraft crew chief, experience that had given him expertise in aviation logistics, mechanical systems, and most importantly, the military discipline that made him valuable to civilian employers. After his discharge, Marcus had found work at Hartsfield-Jackson, where his skills in avionics maintenance and his security clearance made him eligible for positions that required both technical competence and absolute trustworthiness. Marcus worked exclusively night shifts, a schedule that paid better than day work but isolated him from most social interaction with colleagues. His shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., during which he performed routine maintenance on aircraft systems, conducted safety inspections, and handled specialized repairs that required the airport to be relatively quiet. Night shift workers formed their own subculture within the airport ecosystem, but even among this close-knit group, Marcus was known for keeping to himself. His personnel file read like a supervisor's dream. 17 years of employment with perfect attendance, no disciplinary actions, consistently positive performance reviews, and the kind of reliability that made him eligible for solo assignments that required minimal supervision. Marcus had earned security clearances that allowed him access to restricted areas throughout the airport, including cargo facilities, aircraft maintenance areas, and the secure zones where international shipments were processed. But beneath the surface of his orderly professional life, Marcus had been dealing with financial pressure that had been building since his divorce. Legal fees, property settlement costs, and the challenge of maintaining two households on a single income had stretched his resources to the breaking point. His ex-wife, Linda, would later tell investigators that Marcus had become increasingly stressed about money in the months before his disappearance, though he had never discussed any specific plans for addressing his financial problems. What Linda couldn't know was that Marcus had been conducting what he privately called operational reconnaissance of the airport's cargo handling procedures, studying the movement of high-value shipments with the systematic approach that his military training had taught him to apply to complex logistical challenges. His position gave him access to cargo manifests, shipping schedules, and security protocols that revealed patterns most airport employees never noticed. 2 weeks before the theft, Marcus's behavior began to change in ways that would only seem significant in retrospect. He purchased a second-hand cargo van for $8,500 in cash, a transaction that represented a substantial portion of his available savings. The van was a 2015 Ford Transit with over 100,000 miles, chosen for its cargo capacity and mechanical reliability rather than appearance or comfort. Marcus also began stockpiling camping supplies and fuel containers, purchases that he explained to curious neighbors as preparation for a cross-country road trip he was planning. The supplies included sleeping bags, portable water containers, non-perishable food, camp stoves, and multiple 20-gallon fuel tanks that he stored in his apartment's small garage. The quantity and type of supplies suggested preparation for extended travel through remote areas where services might be unavailable. Most tellingly, Marcus purchased 2 burner phones and a low-frequency radio scanner capable of monitoring airport security communications. These devices, combined with his intimate knowledge of airport operations, would prove crucial to planning and executing a theft that required split-second timing and real-time intelligence about security responses. The cargo container that Marcus targeted represented a critical component of a sophisticated money laundering operation that had been using Hartsfield-Jackson as a transit point for over 2 years. According to DEA sources, Latin American cartels had developed increasingly sophisticated methods for moving both drugs and money through the American aviation system, exploiting the massive volume of legitimate cargo that flows through major airports daily. The cartel's aviation cash route relied on embedding currency in dummy crates labeled as aircraft parts, taking advantage of the specialized nature of aviation equipment that made routine inspection difficult. Aircraft components are often expensive, precisely manufactured and packaged in ways that discourage casual handling by personnel who might damage sensitive equipment. This created perfect cover for transporting large amounts of cash disguised as legitimate commercial cargo. The system worked through a network of corrupted airline personnel, freight companies, and customs officials who ensured that specific containers received minimal inspection while appearing to follow standard security protocols. Containers were marked with special codes that indicated they should be handled carefully and expedited through processing, supposedly to prevent damage to sensitive equipment, but actually to minimize opportunities for discovery. The specific container that Marcus targeted was labeled Boeing 777 display panels, fragile electronic equipment, complete with authentic-looking shipping documentation and manifests that would satisfy routine inspection. The paperwork listed the contents as replacement cockpit instruments manufactured by a legitimate aerospace company and destined for maintenance facilities in Bogota. The container even included actual aircraft parts on top of the currency packages, creating a convincing illusion that would defeat casual inspection. Federal investigation would later reveal that the container had originated in Miami, where it was loaded with $16 million in cash, representing proceeds from drug sales across the southeastern United States. The money was vacuum-packed in bundles designed to avoid detection by currency-sniffing dogs and arranged within the container to match the size and weight distribution of genuine aircraft components. The container was routed through Atlanta as part of a carefully planned logistics network that used hub airports to disguise the ultimate destination of criminal proceeds. By moving money through multiple cities before reaching its final destination, the cartel created a paper trail that would be difficult for law enforcement to trace, while providing multiple opportunities to intercept shipments if any single component of the operation was compromised. Marcus's position as an aircraft maintenance technician had given him access to cargo manifests and shipping schedules that revealed the patterns underlying this seemingly legitimate air freight operation. His 17 years of experience at the airport had taught him to recognize which shipments received special handling, which documentation seemed unusual, and most importantly, which containers were valuable enough to justify the risk of theft. The heist began at 3:47 a.m. on June 2nd when Marcus scanned his access card to enter Maintenance Bay 6, officially beginning what appeared to be a routine night shift. His first hours of work were documented through normal channels, safety inspections logged in computerized maintenance records, parts requisitions filed through standard procedures, and radio communications with airport operations that established his presence and normal work patterns. At 4:06 a.m., Marcus made his first deviation from routine by rerouting an empty tug cart from its assigned location to a separate hangar bay. This action was captured on security cameras but appeared completely normal. Maintenance personnel frequently moved equipment between locations as work demands required. The tug cart was a standard piece of airport ground support equipment, capable of moving heavy containers and aircraft components with hydraulic assistance. The critical phase of Marcus's plan began at 4:14 a.m. when airport camera feeds covering the cargo dock area mysteriously went offline for exactly 11 minutes. Post-incident investigation would reveal that the camera malfunction was caused by manual disruption of fiber optic cables that carried video signals from the cargo area to the central security monitoring station. The disruption required intimate knowledge of the airport's surveillance infrastructure and suggested months of advanced planning. During this 11-minute window, Marcus executed the actual theft with military precision. Security footage from adjacent areas captured his tug cart moving toward the cargo dock, though the specific details of his activities remained unrecorded due to the camera disruption. When surveillance was restored at 4:25 a.m., Marcus was seen driving the tug cart away from the cargo area, carrying a container that matched the description of the cartel shipment. At 4:31 a.m., Marcus exited the secure airport area through a rarely used service ramp gate that provided vehicle access to public roads. This exit required his security card and biometric verification, creating an electronic record of his departure that investigators would later use to establish the timing of the theft. By sunrise, Marcus Dale had vanished completely, taking with him more money than most people see in a lifetime. Marcus's escape plan demonstrated the same careful preparation that had characterized the theft itself. Within hours of the crime, he had disappeared so completely that federal investigators would spend years searching for any trace of his activities or current location. His apartment in Decatur showed no signs of hasty departure. Rent was paid through the end of the month. Utilities remained connected, and his personal belongings were arranged normally. But closer inspection revealed that Marcus had systematically removed anything that might provide investigative leads about his future plans or destination. All personal documents, photographs, and computer equipment were gone. His cell phone had been powered off immediately after leaving the airport and was never reactivated. Most importantly, he had liquidated his bank accounts 3 days before the theft, withdrawing all available funds in cash to avoid creating an electronic trail that investigators could follow. 2 days after the theft, Marcus's cargo van was discovered torched near Macon, Georgia, approximately 90 miles south of Atlanta. The vehicle had been completely destroyed by fire, with camp fuel tanks and accelerant residue found inside the burned chassis. The van's VIN number had been carefully removed, preventing investigators from tracing its purchase or registration history. No DNA evidence was recovered from the destroyed vehicle. Neighbors in Marcus's apartment complex reported that he had been off work sick during the week before the theft, though his employer had no record of sick leave requests or medical absence documentation. During this period, witnesses observed Marcus loading sealed drums and containers into his van, activity that seemed consistent with his stated plans for a camping trip, but actually represented preparation for his disappearance. The investigation revealed that both of Marcus's burner phones had briefly pinged cell towers in Alabama before going permanently silent, suggesting that he had traveled west or southwest from Georgia before disabling all electronic devices that might allow tracking. The timing and location of these signals indicated that Marcus had executed a carefully planned escape route that would take him beyond the immediate search area within hours of the theft. The FBI's investigation of Marcus Dale became one of the most comprehensive airport security cases in recent federal law enforcement history. Special Agent Jennifer Walsh, who assumed lead responsibility for the case, quickly recognized that the theft represented something far more sophisticated than opportunistic crime or insider corruption. The timing, execution, and escape planning suggested military-level operational security, combined with intimate knowledge of both airport procedures and criminal transportation networks. Federal authorities confirmed that the stolen $16 million belonged to a Medellin-based cartel operation that had been using American airports to transport drug proceeds back to Colombia for money laundering. The specific container had been loaded in Miami as part of a monthly transfer system that moved an estimated $200 million annually through the Aviation cargo network. Marcus had somehow identified and exploited the one vulnerability in an otherwise carefully planned criminal enterprise. Investigation of airport security records revealed that Marcus's work badge had been cloned and used 3 times in the months before the theft, possibly to test access to restricted areas or to study security responses to unusual activity. The cloning required sophisticated equipment and technical knowledge that suggested either extensive advanced planning or assistance from accomplices with specialized skills. Marcus's ex-wife Linda provided investigators with crucial insights into his mindset and possible escape plans. She revealed that Marcus had become obsessed with remote Alaska in the months before their divorce, frequently watching documentary videos about off-grid survival and using flight tracking applications to study air traffic patterns across North America. He had also expressed interest in areas of Canada and Alaska where a person could live independently without government documentation or social services. These interests, which Linda had dismissed as harmless hobbies during their marriage, took on sinister significance when investigators realized that Marcus might have been researching destinations where someone could disappear permanently while living on stolen money. Alaska and northern Canada contained vast areas where a person with survival skills and adequate resources could avoid detection indefinitely, despite issuing Interpol notices and coordinating with law enforcement agencies across North America. Investigators found no confirmed sightings of Marcus or evidence of his current activities. The complete absence of digital footprints suggested either death or access to sophisticated false identity resources that would allow him to operate under documentation that investigators couldn't trace. The theft triggered immediate security improvements at Hartsfield-Jackson and airports across the United States. The incident exposed vulnerabilities in cargo handling procedures that criminal organizations had been exploiting for years, leading to enhanced surveillance systems, improved personnel screening, and stricter protocols for handling high-value shipments. Several TSA contractors were fired for negligence in allowing Marcus access to areas and information that exceeded his official responsibilities. The airport also implemented new procedures for monitoring employee activities in restricted areas and detecting unusual patterns that might indicate criminal planning. But despite these improvements, the fundamental challenge remained unchanged. Airport operations require thousands of trusted employees with access to sensitive areas, and any one of these individuals might potentially exploit their position for criminal purposes. Marcus Dale had demonstrated that even the most extensive background checks and security protocols couldn't prevent a determined insider from identifying and exploiting system vulnerabilities. The cartel's response to the theft was surprisingly muted, lacking the violent retaliation that typically followed major security breaches. This unusual restraint led some investigators to theorize that Marcus might have negotiated protection or assistance from criminal organizations, trading his knowledge of airport security procedures for safe passage and new identity resources. Alternative theories suggested that the cartel had decided to write off the loss rather than risk drawing additional law enforcement attention to their aviation money laundering operations. The theft had already triggered comprehensive federal investigation that threatened to expose the entire network, making recovery of the stolen money less important than protecting ongoing criminal enterprises. The most disturbing possibility was that Marcus had been eliminated by cartel operatives shortly after the theft, with his body disposed of so completely that it would never be recovered. This theory gained credibility from the organization's well-documented history of violent retaliation against anyone who threatened their operations, regardless of whether the threat came from rival criminals or law enforcement agencies. The cartel's standard operating procedure involved systematic elimination of security breaches through methods designed to both recover stolen assets and send messages to other potential threats. The fact that no violent incidents had been reported in connection with Marcus's disappearance could indicate either that he had successfully evaded cartel hunters or that his elimination had been so thorough that investigators would never discover evidence of his fate. Some federal agents theorized that Marcus's military training and operational planning skills might have allowed him to anticipate cartel retaliation and prepare countermeasures that neutralized the threat. His Air Force background included training in hostile environment survival and escape techniques that could prove valuable when pursued by well-funded criminal organizations with unlimited resources for tracking down threats. The absence of any credible intelligence about cartel activities related to Marcus's disappearance was itself significant, suggesting either that the organization had written off the loss as acceptable business expense, or that their response had been so compartmentalized that even federal surveillance couldn't detect it. Both possibilities indicated a level of organizational sophistication that made Marcus's continued survival increasingly unlikely as time passed. 3 years after the theft, Marcus Dale remains on the FBI's most wanted list, charged with theft of government property, money laundering, and conspiracy to interfere with federal aviation operations. The $500,000 reward for information leading to his arrest represents one of the largest bounties ever offered for an airport-related crime, reflecting both the significance of the theft and the government's determination to prevent similar incidents. The reward has generated hundreds of tips from across the United States and Canada, ranging from credible sightings to obvious hoaxes submitted by individuals seeking easy money. Each tip requires investigation by federal agents, consuming thousands of hours of law enforcement time while yielding no verified information about Marcus's location or activities. The most promising leads have come from remote areas of Alaska and northern Canada, where Marcus's survival skills and preparation for off-grid living would be most valuable. Several unconfirmed sightings have placed someone matching his description in wilderness communities where questions about personal background are discouraged and cash transactions are common. A hardware store owner in Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, reported selling camping equipment to a man who resembled Marcus, paying cash and showing unusual interest in items needed for extended wilderness survival. Security camera footage from the transaction was too poor quality for positive identification, but the customer's behavior and appearance were consistent with someone attempting to avoid detection while preparing for long-term isolation. Similar reports have emerged from locations across the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, creating a pattern that suggests Marcus might have successfully reached areas where survival skills and adequate funding could allow indefinite avoidance of law enforcement. These remote regions contain vast areas where a person could live independently for decades without ever encountering government officials or law enforcement personnel. But despite the geographic pattern of reported sightings, investigators acknowledge that confirming Marcus's presence in any specific location has proven impossible. The wilderness areas where he might be hiding are so extensive and sparsely populated that comprehensive search operations would require resources far beyond what any law enforcement agency could provide. The case has become a textbook example of how insider threats represent the greatest challenge to aviation security, regardless of how sophisticated technological safeguards become. Marcus had used his legitimate access and knowledge to identify vulnerabilities that outside criminals could never have discovered, demonstrating that the most dangerous threats often come from the most trusted sources. Security experts studying the case have identified several factors that made Marcus's theft possible. His extensive experience with airport operations, his security clearances that provided access to restricted areas, his technical knowledge of surveillance systems, and most importantly, his military training that equipped him with operational planning skills typically associated with intelligence professionals rather than maintenance workers. The combination of these factors created what security analysts describe as the perfect insider threat. Someone with both the access and the competence necessary to exploit system vulnerabilities while avoiding detection during the critical phases of criminal activity. Preventing similar incidents requires fundamental changes to how airports screen, monitor, and manage personnel with access to sensitive areas. Federal investigators acknowledge that the trail has gone completely cold, though they maintain hope that Marcus will eventually make contact with family members or surface in a way that provides investigative leads. The transformation of a respected aircraft maintenance technician into an international fugitive represents one of the most dramatic character arcs in modern criminal history. Agent Walsh continues to review the case quarterly, searching for new information or investigative approaches that might yield progress. She has consulted with military intelligence specialists, wilderness survival experts, and behavioral analysts in efforts to understand how Marcus might be living and where he could be hiding. But each avenue of investigation has reached dead ends that suggest Marcus planned his disappearance with exceptional thoroughness. Marcus Dale represents every airport security manager's worst nightmare, Agent Walsh explained during a recent case briefing. He was the employee you never worried about, the person who seemed incapable of criminal behavior. But underneath that reliable exterior was someone with the skills and motivation to pull off one of the most sophisticated airport thefts in American history. The financial impact of Marcus's theft extended far beyond the immediate loss of $16 million. The incident triggered comprehensive security reviews at airports nationwide, resulting in millions of dollars in additional screening equipment, personnel training, and procedural modifications. Insurance costs for aviation cargo operations increased significantly as underwriters recognized new categories of risk that hadn't been adequately addressed in previous policies. More importantly, the theft exposed vulnerabilities in the international money laundering networks that cartels had been using to move criminal proceeds through legitimate transportation systems. Federal investigation of the compromised operation led to arrests of dozens of individuals involved in the broader money laundering conspiracy, effectively dismantling a network that had been moving hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The cartel's aviation money laundering operation never recovered from the security breach that Marcus's theft had created. Increased federal scrutiny made airports less attractive for moving large amounts of cash, forcing criminal organizations to develop new transportation methods that were less efficient and more vulnerable to interdiction. From the cartel's perspective, Marcus Dale had inflicted damage far exceeding the value of the money he had stolen. The operational disruption, increased law enforcement attention, and need to develop alternative transportation methods cost the organization significantly more than $16 million while reducing their ability to move criminal proceeds efficiently. This broader impact might explain the unusual absence of violent retaliation that typically followed major thefts from cartel operations. Rather than investing resources in hunting down Marcus, the organization may have chosen to focus on rebuilding their money laundering infrastructure through different channels that offered better security and less risk of detection. If Marcus successfully escaped with the stolen money, he possesses enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of his life without ever working again. His military training, technical skills, and apparent talent for operational planning suggest that he might be capable of maintaining his freedom indefinitely, especially if he reached a remote location where questions about personal background would be discouraged. The $16 million that Marcus stole represents enough money to purchase property, establish a new identity, and support a modest lifestyle for several decades. If invested conservatively, the principal could generate sufficient income to support comfortable living without ever touching the original theft proceeds, effectively providing Marcus with financial independence for life. His preparation for wilderness survival and apparent interest in remote Alaska suggest that Marcus might have chosen to disappear into areas where his money would last even longer and where detection by law enforcement would be virtually impossible. The combination of adequate funding and survival skills could allow him to live independently in locations where government presence is minimal and questions about personal history are rarely asked. The investigation continues, though with significantly reduced intensity as other cases demand attention and resources. Marcus's case file remains active, and any information related to his possible whereabouts receives immediate attention from federal investigators. But as time passes, the likelihood of resolving the case through conventional investigative methods continues to diminish. The case serves as a reminder that even in an age of global communication and digital tracking, someone with the right combination of skills, knowledge, and planning can still vanish completely. Marcus Dale had spent 17 years learning the airport's vulnerabilities while earning the trust that made his theft possible. When opportunity aligned with desperation and careful planning, he executed a crime that federal investigators may never be able to solve. Whether Marcus Dale is living free in a remote wilderness location, hiding in plain sight under a false identity, or buried in an unmarked grave as punishment for his theft, his story has become legendary within both law enforcement and aviation security circles. He achieved what most criminals only dream of: the perfect crime followed by complete disappearance. Airport security personnel now study Marcus's case as an example of how trusted insiders can become the greatest threats to system integrity. His theft demonstrated that preventing insider crimes requires more than background checks and security clearances. It demands continuous monitoring, behavioral analysis, and recognition that financial pressure or personal crisis can transform reliable employees into dangerous criminals. The empty cargo trolley where Marcus's theft was first discovered has been replaced, but his case continues to influence airport security procedures worldwide. New protocols for monitoring employee activities, tracking cargo movements, and detecting unusual patterns have been implemented at major airports across the United States and internationally. But security experts acknowledge that determined insiders will always pose challenges that technology alone cannot address. Marcus Dale succeeded because he combined legitimate access with criminal intent, technical knowledge with operational planning, and most importantly, the patience to study his target over many years before striking when conditions were optimal. The psychological profile developed by FBI behavioral analysts suggests that Marcus represented a new category of criminal, the accidental insider threat, who transforms from trusted employee to sophisticated criminal when personal circumstances create desperation combined with opportunity. Unlike traditional criminals who seek out targets, Marcus was placed in proximity to valuable assets through legitimate employment, then gradually developed criminal intentions as financial pressure mounted. His case has influenced hiring practices at airports nationwide, with new emphasis on continuous monitoring of employee financial status, behavioral changes, and access patterns that might indicate developing criminal intent. But experts acknowledge that such monitoring raises privacy concerns and may not detect individuals like Marcus, who plan meticulously over extended periods. The technology that Marcus used to disable security cameras has led to significant improvements in surveillance systems at major airports. Fiber optic cables are now protected by tamper-evident systems that immediately alert security personnel to any interference. Redundant camera networks ensure that temporary outages in one system don't create total blind spots that could be exploited by knowledgeable insiders. But these technological improvements highlight the fundamental challenge that Marcus's case represents: preventing crimes by individuals who understand both the systems they're attacking and the countermeasures designed to stop them. His 17 years of experience had given him knowledge that new security measures could only partially address. The international implications of Marcus's theft extended far beyond American aviation security. The cartel money laundering network that he disrupted had connections to criminal organizations across Latin America, and the federal investigation, triggered by his crime, led to cooperation between law enforcement agencies in multiple countries. Interpol coordinated searches across 17 countries, focusing on locations where Marcus might have fled using false documentation. The investigation revealed the scope of international money laundering operations that used aviation cargo systems, leading to enhanced screening procedures and information sharing between customs agencies worldwide. Mexican authorities provided crucial intelligence about cartel transportation methods, while Canadian law enforcement agencies coordinated searches in wilderness areas where Marcus might be hiding. The case demonstrated how a single crime could trigger international cooperation on a scale typically reserved for terrorism or major drug trafficking investigations. European airports implemented new procedures based on lessons learned from Marcus's theft, recognizing that criminal organizations operated internationally and that vulnerabilities in one country's aviation system could be exploited to threaten global security. The case became a catalyst for international aviation security reforms that continue to influence policy development worldwide. Marcus's military background has led to enhanced screening of veterans employed in sensitive airport positions, though this approach raises complex issues about discrimination against individuals who served their country honorably. The vast majority of veterans working in aviation demonstrate the same loyalty and integrity they showed during military service, making Marcus's case an unfortunate exception rather than a representative example. Military training provides skills that are valuable for legitimate employment in aviation security, maintenance, and logistics. The challenge is distinguishing between veterans who will use their training to protect aviation systems and those who might exploit their knowledge for criminal purposes. Marcus's case suggests that financial pressure combined with detailed system knowledge can transform even trusted employees into serious threats. The psychological evaluation conducted as part of the FBI investigation revealed that Marcus exhibited characteristics common among successful criminals: intelligence, patience, attention to detail, and the ability to maintain normal behavior while planning complex illegal activities. But these same traits made him an excellent employee for most of his career, demonstrating the difficulty of predicting criminal behavior based on personality assessment. His transformation from reliable worker to international fugitive occurred gradually over months or possibly years, suggesting that early intervention might have prevented the crime if supervisors had recognized warning signs. Financial counseling, employee assistance programs, and confidential reporting systems might help identify workers whose personal circumstances are creating pressures that could lead to criminal behavior. The impact on Marcus's family has been devastating, with his ex-wife Linda and their teenage daughter facing ongoing scrutiny from federal investigators and media attention that has disrupted their lives completely. Linda has moved twice since the theft, seeking privacy and trying to rebuild a normal life, while coping with the knowledge that her former husband is an international fugitive. Their daughter, now 16, struggles with the legacy of her father's crime and the constant possibility that he might be captured or killed. Family members receive periodic contact from FBI agents seeking information about Marcus's possible whereabouts, keeping the trauma fresh and preventing normal healing processes. The financial impact on the family has been significant, with legal costs, lost income, and the need for enhanced security measures creating ongoing hardship. Marcus's theft not only destroyed his own life, but inflicted lasting damage on innocent family members who had no knowledge of his criminal planning. The ongoing nature of Marcus's case, with no resolution 3 years after the crime, provides unique insights into the challenges of international manhunts and the limitations of modern investigative techniques when confronting determined criminals who understand law enforcement methods. Aviation security experts continue to analyze Marcus's theft for lessons that might prevent similar incidents. His crime demonstrated vulnerabilities that even sophisticated security systems couldn't address when exploited by knowledgeable insiders with legitimate access to restricted areas and sensitive information. He knew the planes, the routes, the blind spots, and how to disappear like vapor off the runway, Agent Walsh reflected during a recent case review. Whether Marcus Dale is living free somewhere or paid the ultimate price for his crime, he achieved something that most criminals only dream of. He became completely invisible when it mattered most. The investigation that began with an empty cargo trolley on a humid Georgia morning has consumed thousands of hours of federal agent time, involved cooperation with law enforcement agencies across North America, and changed aviation security procedures worldwide. But the man who triggered this massive response remains as elusive as he was on the morning he walked away from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport with $16 million in stolen cartel money. Marcus Dale, last seen June 2nd, 2021. $16 million still missing. FBI reward active. Case remains open. Be recovered. This theory gained credibility from the organization's well-documented history of violent retaliation against anyone who threatened their operations, regardless of whether the threat came from rival criminals or law enforcement agencies.